Hey, good afternoon, and welcome to the Storm Report. I want to welcome into the storm shelter my friend, Marc Nudelberg. He's a coach. He's very passionate about what he does. And Marc, why don't you tell us your story?
My story, that's a long one. First, let me say thank you, Chip. I appreciate being here on the Storm Report in the Storm Shelter, which that whoever came up with that marketing idea is a genius.
Yes, I would
Um,
agree.
and so my story is I'll try to keep it short and simple. Grew up in an entrepreneurial family here in South Florida. Great grandfather, grandfather, and father, all entrepreneurs. I grew up playing football, although I was not the most talented of players. I took the opportunity to stay involved with football when I went to the great University of Florida State University. Had the opportunity to work my way up through the organization there during my undergrad, from being an equipment manager to being a student assistant coach, with originally Coach Bowden and then Jimbo Fisher as the offensive coordinator. And then when I graduated, Jimbo Fisher became the head coach, which launched a 10-year full-time coaching career for me that took me from Florida State to Cincinnati to the University of Florida to the University of Nevada to Lafayette College. And then after 5 schools in 10 years, I stepped out of coaching. I stepped out of athletics. I stayed in coaching, but I started my entrepreneurial journey for myself down here in South Florida, where we have built a successful training and development company titled On the Ball.
So it sounds like you have a lot of frequent flyer miles based on all that travel that you said that you've been doing. But
Yeah, it was. I was fortunate in the coaching profession to see a lot of the country. I mean, most people think when they hear University of Nevada, they think Las Vegas. It was actually up in Reno, which
yeah,
is the northwest corner of the state, which is really more like Sacramento and San Francisco for people. So being over on the West Coast, being in the Northeast in Easton, Pennsylvania, which is about an hour north of Philly, living in Cincinnati, which I would consider the Midwest or close to it, offered me a great opportunity in my young professional career to see the country and to
yeah,
experience different cultures and to live in the snow, which for a kid from South Florida was an interesting experience. The first time I ever had to shovel snow or scrape ice off of my windshield. But then being at those schools, I also recruited geographically where I was. So even though I was living in Nevada, I recruited the state of Washington. I recruited Oregon. I recruited Colorado. So for me, definitely a lot of miles put on throughout those years, but unbelievable experiences that I leverage now as I build relationships in growing our business, because I can speak to almost anybody about where they're from and the culture that exists there and have some kind of story to connect with them on.
so you just said something that I wanted to just kind of go back on. Um, you mentioned the connections with people, and have you maintained? I know that, and this is a loaded question because I know that you've maintained these relationships because I saw that you were up at the FSU Real
Yeah.
Estate Trends Conference, seeing some of your old cronies up there. How was that?
Yeah. It was super cool to be back in Tallahassee. Got the opportunity to speak to the real estate school and the alumni and the students, but I was there for a couple days and had the opportunity to spend time with Randy Shannon, who's the linebackers coach, who I worked with actually at the University of Florida. Coach Hagens, who's the D-line coach that's been there for, I want to say like 40
Yeah,
years at this point. Like,
maybe. Yeah,
played there, immediately went into GAing and became a coach there and has been there for forever. And it was really cool to, as my career and my life has evolved and changed, go back and sit with those guys and realize that the relationships that I built long ago or a few years ago or whatever it was have stood the test of time and stood the distance. I don't talk to those guys consistently, but hearing from Randy that he stays up to date with what I do on LinkedIn and through Facebook and Instagram and stuff like that, it was cool to hear that those guys are still invested in my success and watching, even though we're no longer in the same profession.
yeah, that's really cool stuff. Just as a weird thing, I always wonder when I heard you talk about recruiting and recruiting around the country. Is there a player in the NFL right now that you recruited in
There's lots of
college?
players in the NFL that I've recruited. I was fortunate to work with a lot of great special teams players. Eddie Pinero, who's a kicker in the NFL,
Yeah.
I had the
Hmm.
opportunity to recruit to the University of Florida. And then guys that I worked with while I was at Florida State, Dustin Hopkins, Graham
Hmm.
Gano, are still veteran kickers in the NFL. Most of the players that I coached, guys like Terrence Brooks, guys like Nick Moody, Devontae Freeman, James Wilder, most of them, their careers have ended in the NFL and they're out doing other things. But Alex Anzalone, who I coached at the University of Florida, is playing for the Lions. So it's always cool to me to turn on a game on Sunday and see the players that I had the opportunity to work with and the opportunity to coach and have an impact on having successful careers on Sundays. Because as a coach, whether it was in the athletic world or what it's in what we do now, when you work with somebody who reaches the highest level, or you had any kind of part in their journey, you get to experience the success with them. And
Yeah.
that feeling is the thing that keeps me being a coach.
Angelo, he had a big game against the Bucks this past weekend. I don't
He
know if you
did.
saw that game. He did. He,
He
he was a
did.
difference
He's
maker in that game. So
absolutely.
that's cool to watch. So, one of the things I do, I ask guests, what was the biggest storm in your life and how did you overcome that?
I have to tell you, Chip, have been lots and lots of storms in my life. But probably the easiest one to talk about, or the people that would look at as like, whoa, the biggest shift, would be the transition from my college football career into the business career that I have now and the entrepreneurial journey that I have now. I think most people don't think about restarting their career at 32
Mhm.
years old. Most people don't think about, building something and earning your way with sweat equity and relationship equity inside of an industry. And at really the top, or right as you're reaching the top, go, you know what? I think I'm going to try something else. And that's really what happened to me.
Yeah.
And I was afforded the opportunity to really question whether or not I was willing to make the sacrifices necessary to continue to go inside of that, and whether or not that specific job was fulfilling to me still, right? And I think as people, we get a vision, we start getting towards it, we start making progress towards it, and then we just kind of put it on autopilot, and we
Yeah.
stop asking ourselves the internal questions of, am I still happy? Is this still really what drives me? Is this still really what I want? And I was offered an opportunity at 32 to hit pause and really assess that. And when I questioned it and didn't have an immediate response, yes, I knew that it was time for me to maybe try something new. And I didn't know whether or not I'd go back to coaching football, but I knew it was the right time for me to see if I could be happy doing something else. And then, took the opportunity to come out, got into the business world, got into a sales job. And that transition is difficult. I think,
Mhm.
it's easy for me to kind of breeze over it and be like, oh, well, I just made a change. It was a huge change. My identity was wrapped around being a football coach. Everything that as a football coach, I spent 16 hours a day working in the job for 345 days a year. So it was really everything. We say, family, football, family, faith, and football, but it's not. It's
Yeah.
football all the time. And everything takes a back seat to the career. And so adjusting to having a life outside of a career, and adjusting to not having my identity be what I did, and separating who I was from the game of football, and then figuring out how to be successful in another industry was all hard to navigate at that time. And the unknown and the feeling of starting over and having to learn more. At that point in my football career, I was confident that I could step in the room with any football coach in the country and be able to talk X's and O's, and be able to be at the expert level that they were. I was a rookie in business. I didn't know the ins and outs and the way a business was run. And even though there are plenty of similarities in the sports world, it was all still new to me. And so I
Yeah.
was officially a rookie again, and becoming a rookie at 32 is hard. And I would say that was a big storm for me. But the morals and the principles of um the morals and the principles of mindset, of focusing on process and not results, and just discipline to behavior, which comes out of my football career, all helped me be successful in the transition.
Yeah. That's really interesting because, I've been doing what I do, insurance, since I got out of college. So
Right.
yeah, I've been doing it for a while. I'm not going to
Yeah.
date myself, but
Yeah.
there's a little snow on the roof, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
But,
Yep.
I went through, where I work now, we went through a professional development class, and it really got me rethinking and retooling how I approach my work and how I approach this craft that I do. And it was a little, I'm not going to say it wasn't scary. It was thinking, I've done this for so many, and they actually told you that we know you've done this for many years. You've been successful, but if you do this, this is just a little tweak in your system and your process and your mindset, and it could, really help you and provide explosive growth. So,
Well,
um,
that philosophy, right? And I think about the word professional. To me, as a football coach, the word professional meant NFL. All of
mhm,
the kids that that I was responsible for coaching, the majority of them had dreams to go on to become a professional athlete. And in the business world, we just kind of throw that title around. Because you get a job inside of an organization, now all of a sudden you're a professional. Well, that never really sat right with me as I came out of football, because professional carried a whole different level of expectation, of preparation, of performance, of all of the things that you think about when you think about competing at the highest level. And so as I was sitting in my role, and I was like, so I'm a professional now, but I'm watching the way you prepare every day. I'm watching the way you manage your time. I'm watching the way you train and develop. I'm watching the way you practice. None of that says professional to me. So, how do I really own that title of professional in the business world? What does that look like? I knew very clearly what it looked like as a football player, as a football
mhm,
coach. I had to define what that really looked like, and the fundamentals are the same: preparation. But preparation in terms of being a football coach, while it's still research and while it's still developing strategy and it's still all of those things, it looks different in the business world. Research in the business world is understanding your industry,
mm,
understanding your company, understanding your clients or your prospective clients, understanding them as people, doing that kind of research in order to be able to develop strategies to help them be successful, or to help you guys have a successful partnership. So the fundamentals were the same, but the way those fundamentals show up in terms of sport versus business were different. And I had to define those things for myself in order to be able to go execute on them, which is a learning process. And for me, it couldn't happen fast enough.
yeah.
I was so eager to reach that level that I just had to, I had that drive that it had to happen faster than I knew it was going to take to happen.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier about process, and that's so key. Is it's that concept of take care of the little things, and the bigger things will take care of themselves, right? So process. You mentioned at the very beginning on the ball, and you work with your dad and your brother. So I was just wondering
Super
how.
fortunate to be in a family business.
Yeah, it sounds like it, and I just from where I sit, it looks like you guys have fun working together. I was just wondering, you ever seen that Orange County Chopper show with the dynamic with those father
A
and sons?
long time ago, a long time ago. And yes, I would say the dynamic of father son, the dynamic of brother, all shows up all the time. But I think we do a pretty good job of navigating it in a way where we keep it really really beneficial, right? And really, impactful. We understand that we're all tend to be atypical personalities and tend to be the alpha in the room and communicate in a very commanding and demanding way. Most of us, most of the time, do a good job of not allowing that to get in the way of what we're trying to accomplish, of not hearing how they're saying something, but just hearing what they're saying and trying to continue to move the conversations along. Because the reason that I enjoy working in my family business is we all have a very high standard of excellence.
Hmm.
And that's hard to come by, whether it be in a football team or whether it be inside of an organization. And Nick Saban said this a long time ago, and I believe it to be true. High performers don't like mediocre people, and mediocre people don't like high performers, not because of results, but because of their level of expectation and because of the level of performance or preparation or daily behaviors that each other have. And so the reason high performers don't like mediocre people is because high performers know that a certain level of preparation and practice and failure are all necessary for them to be successful. And mediocre people want to avoid those things. They want to avoid being uncomfortable. They want to avoid having the difficult conversation. They want to avoid the accountability. And when you're inside of an organization that may have mediocre expectations or mediocre leaders, it makes it hard for a person who is striving to have that kind of standard of excellence every day to continue to show up and match that for themselves. So the thing I love about my family is that they're all high performers or have a standard of high performance, and that helps all of us be our best selves every day.
Is it hard? We talk about work life balance, and working with your father and your brother, that could seem to be a lot of pretty difficult, I would think. Like, yeah, at what point do you guys separate the work from the family? Like at Thanksgiving, are you guys talking about what you're doing on Monday, or do you kind of like, hey, let's take a
Sometimes,
break?
sure. I mean, I think it first of all, I think if you don't if you love what you do,
Mhm.
then you tend to wanna talk about what you do, right? I don't care if it's a family business or it's just some a business that you work inside of. When you have passion for your profession, you wanna talk about it. And
Yeah.
so we're passionate about what we do, and so therefore it shows up in conversations, but it will only last for a few minutes or maybe something that we're talking about real quickly, and then we move on and we go back to spending time as Poppy with my sons and
Yeah.
him being a grandfather or my brother being an uncle. Or we love sports as a family, so we're always talking about sports and watching sports. We love entertainment, we love music and movies, we're talking about concerts, we go to concerts together, we're talking about the shows that we're watching. So while there is a blend of business in there, it doesn't dominate the conversation. And even when there are very difficult situations, accountability, disagreements, we never let that affect the family relationship. And we tend to, do a pretty good job of understanding we all have a job, we all have a responsibility to help grow the business. And if at any point that didn't fit you, fine. That doesn't mean I'm not going to be your son. It doesn't mean you're not going to be my dad. It doesn't mean we're not going to be brothers. But, those are different conversations that we have to have, and
Yeah.
we're able to separate them.
Yeah. And it's nice that you can talk candidly to each other like that, because you do have that family bond that allows you to
Well,
be brutally honest, right?
and I would tell you that even though we can speak candidly with each other, we still understand each other. We still have
Mhm.
an understanding, and nobody's being disrespectful. Nobody's speaking out of turn. Even if we get, emotional, we'll back it down and we'll say, okay, hold on. Let me try to speak more clearly in what I'm trying to talk about, which I would tell you, being a part of tons of high performance organizations and teams, and some teams and organizations that underperformed, you need to have that kind of relationship. Even
Mm.
if you're not a family business, your team needs to have some kind of family bond and some type of common bond between everybody that offers the opportunity to be candid, that offers the opportunity to be authentic, that offers the opportunity to be your true selves, because that's what high performance and great teams are made of, is that family, brotherly, sibling love that holds everybody together.
Yeah. And, and I feel like in corporate America, that bond is culture in it within a corporation. And, I've worked with some companies that have great culture. I work with one now, and I've worked with some in the past that really, they said they had culture, but they didn't have culture. But,
Yep.
well, hey,
Yeah,
I want to,
culture is not a poster. It's not a foosball table. Culture is behavior.
yeah.
Culture is a shared set of values that drive the way you make decisions. And we happen to be a family, right, who is in business together. So we have shared values not only around family, but also around the way we want to run our business. If
Mhm.
we ever didn't share those values, we wouldn't be family, and we wouldn't be
Yeah.
in business together, regardless of one or the other. So you hope that as you build a family, you build it around a core set of values and beliefs that help drives everybody's behavior. It's the same in the business. If
Mhm.
we ever didn't agree on what the values were that drove our business, we wouldn't be in business together.
Yeah. No, true. You've given us a lot of things, great things to think about today. One thing I always like to ask at the end is, what advice would you give somebody to be successful in their business? What's the one thing that they should focus on?
That it starts in your mind,
Yeah.
because and I do a lot of training around developing a mindset and developing a growth mindset, but understanding that a mindset is really defined at how you perceive and organize information is a huge unlock to understanding why you're unhappy, or why you can't figure out how to get over the hump, or why you feel negative. So
Hmm.
understanding that your mindset affects the way you think and the way you perceive everything that's happening around you, and taking responsibility for that. If you start there, you've got an unbelievable opportunity to control what you can control in terms of determining your success. But if you ignore the mindset and you ignore the factors that build that, you're leaving a lot up to chance and to everybody around you.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. Um, I think what I could do, we'll wrap it up. I want to ask you one last question. Well, maybe
Okay.
two, because I see something behind
Okay.
you. I got to ask you about it. But how do you think the Knowles are going to finish this year? What do you think? We're 7-0,
Oh,
or
I think we're a playoff team. I
yeah?
don't think we're quite ready to win a national championship. I'm not saying we can't beat Georgia or Michigan or Alabama, but I think we're not quite there. Could we
Hmm.
win in a game? Absolutely. But I think if you're asking us to play two of those three teams at the end of the year back to back, we're probably going to drop one. But we are definitely good enough to win the ACC this year. We are definitely good enough to make the playoff, and we're definitely good enough to get into the championship. So, are we back? I'd say we're pretty close to being back. I think that the talent level is there and getting there. I think the thing that they really need to continue to develop is the depth around the team. But, not everybody can be like that 2013 team that had, something like 25 NFL players on both sides of the ball. So,
Oh yeah.
I'm proud of what Coach Norvell has done. I'm proud of the kids that are there right now, and I'm super excited to go see them reach the expectation of playing for a championship.
Yeah, I was really you can tell they bought into, because we talked about culture earlier. They've bought into the culture, and
Yep.
you can tell. And and I agree with you 100% that they're just this far away. I think
Just they're right there. They're right there.
the only criticism I would have is they get a little complacent in the second quarter. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's like there are opportunities where they could just finish someone, but they're like, "Hey, we're ahead." It's
Yeah.
cruise control, and then
Yeah.
next thing you know, they've let them back in the game because those guys are playing hard too.
It's not even a level of complacency, really. Like, when I watch teams, it's just about consistency of execution. The
Hmm.
reason Alabama is so hard to beat is because they execute more consistently than everybody else. Yes, they have great players. Yes, they have great talent, but talent without execution is an average football team. isn't
Yeah.
average anything. I don't care whether you're talking about a salesperson or a leader or anybody
Mhm.
inside of an organization. Talent without execution is average. And so the reason Alabama has been so consistently great is because they have great talent and they have consistent execution. Georgia is the same way at this point. They've recruited well for a very long time. Why doesn't Texas A&M compete for national championships after having 5 top 5 recruiting
Yeah.
classes? Is discipline and execution. So consistency of execution. So I think we still lack in the consistency of execution. But I'll say this from this game this past weekend, the Duke Blue Devils are a good football team. They're
They are.
talented. They consistently execute. They are one of the better teams in the ACC, and to see us beat them and come back and battle adversity, that's not something the Noles would have done in the previous years. So I
Mhm.
think we're plenty good enough to win the ACC and get into the championship. Are we consistent enough to win a championship? I think there's still question marks around that.
Yeah, they gotta learn that. They have to learn that. Okay, great.
Exactly.
Well, hey, thanks for your
Yep,
time
thank
today.
you.
It's been
Thank you very
awesome.
much.
Come back to the storm shelter whenever you want, and maybe we'll talk about a little playoff football too.
I would love to do that. Hopefully, we're having that conversation here in a few weeks.
That would be awesome. All
Thanks,
right,
Chip.
man. Take care. Bye.
Bye.